This is the OverReaction podcast.
Morris, my friend, how you been?
Hey, Jeremy. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So where are you today? You traveling? You're on the road?
You know, I just got back from Las Vegas, of all places, where we had some meetings. There's some conferences out there. And I actually was in a conference room for a little while right next to the WNBA team from Connecticut that was getting ready to play that night in Vegas. So I felt like I was part of the big leagues.
Oh, nice. So what was the conference in Vegas?
So there was a few different ones related to some different healthcare pieces. And then there was a big HP conference and some others that were going on out there. So we met with some partners and had a chance to kind of catch up on a bunch of different things. One thing that's kind of nice about these conferences, increasingly, I find that conferences have a lot of conference adjacency. I think it started with JP Morgan, which started looking like a medieval fair where everybody would cluster around. And I think most people who have, quote unquote, been to JP Morgan have never actually been to JP Morgan and have just been around JP Morgan. So there's a lot going on around the conference circuit. And I think that's one of the strengths right now of some of these cities that have built up kind of industries to cater to that. So you used to find yourself at JP Morgan kind of clustering into I think the worst story I heard was somebody sharing a space inside of a McDonald's bathroom. But after that, I think people realized they could do something a little better than that.
Yeah.
And I think all these cities have kind of started to cater to that.
That's classic. So how was Sim? I mean, that's kind of more your wheelhouse. So how was that show? I haven't been back in years, but how was it?
You know, I would go back. And one of the things that I think happened in Sim, if you do the arc of Sim, and it used to be called something else, in fact, but if you do the arc of that conference, of that society, there was a period of time when it was really active. And that was kind of when they introduced PAX and you went from film to digital, and it was like a big deal. That was some time ago, and things kind of at some point kind of started to slow down a little bit. But now Sim is more relevant than ever, largely because of what's happening around AI. And when you see what people are doing and you see the uncertainty, it's what drives conferences, right? If you really know everything, you feel like you got your direction, you don't bother to go to a conference. But if you really are kind of trying to figure it all out, you invest in that. And right now, AI is driving the agenda in ways that not everybody agrees with, not everybody understands. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether this will be what people think it will be, or whether it's going to evolve in a very different direction. So Sim was about that. So pretty dynamic show, great people. And one thing that Sim also does, which I think is really important, is it mimics or mirrors something that is going to happen in American healthcare, which is American healthcare increasingly is a mix of a person and a machine. Technology is more important than ever. And Sim does a great job of breaking down some of those cultural barriers. One of the things that I think is tough in medicine is it's very stratified. It's kind of its own very special society. And you kind of know where you stand. I don't think that's that healthy, but it is extremely stratified. And there's some good reasons for that too. I mean, there's a certain sense when you're really in crisis that you need to know where everybody stands. You know, that's really important. But it also sometimes makes it hard to collaborate across silos. And one of the things that Sim does is tries to break that down. So when people are trying to do something where they really should be working together, and maybe somebody who ordinarily would not be the most important in the room now is the most important in the room, can interact with someone who's used to being the most important person in the room.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember the first one I went to, it was called SCAR.
Yes, it was. And that, I don't really know who would do that to a conference, but yes, that was the name.
Yeah, first one I went to, I think it was 2004 in Vancouver, BC.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not start going until after the name had changed, but every once in a while I would hear that, and yeah, so that's why
Yeah. So have they expanded the speakers? I haven't been in like 5 years. One of the big criticisms was it's the same group. It's the same guys again and again and again, the most part. Talking about it, which kind of makes sense because they're on the bleeding edge, but also after a while, what is that saying?
Yeah.
Familiarity breeds contempt. And I don't mean necessarily
Yeah.
contempt, but it's more familiarity breeds yawns,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. I did not get that feeling this year. I got the feeling that you're starting to see some new energy. We did a thing for the first time we had done, ironically, in 5 years, which was we sponsored the Rad Equal Awards. And with Rad Equal, I don't know if you're that familiar with the Rad Equal Awards, but we started sponsoring an organization that Geraldine McGinty founded called Rad XX.
Wasn't she the president of ACR for a bit?
Yeah. And so what Rad XX was really designed to do was to bring new people into the profession, make it more accessible to, initially it was really women in radiology, and the XX stood for the chromosomes. And then ultimately it kind of had a broader view as those issues became more contentious, and, they wanted to be as inclusive as possible. It went to Rad Equal.
Gotcha.
And one of the things that's kind of cool about Rad Equal is because it's kind of self-consciously trying to cultivate new talent, you see new faces. And so one of the things that may have biased my view was because we were so engaged with that, I get a chance to see some of the quote unquote, new talent that's coming through and is starting to make an impact on the profession. And so this year I met people who I had never met. And that was something that doesn't usually happen to me at conferences, in the sense of, I know a lot of the people who are kind of in that kind of group. And here there was a whole new group of people. And I think that's indicative of the fact that they're trying to reach out and bring different voices into that mix.
Gotcha. So how did you get into this kind of niche? I mean, it's a big niche within healthcare, subspecialty of medical imaging.
So I first and foremost am a software entrepreneur. And when we pitched our idea to the VC, we pitched to the healthcare people and we pitched to the IT people. And we almost didn't get funded because the IT people said that I was not a healthcare person, and the healthcare people said I was too much of an IT person. And so I was sort of like,
yep,
okay, this isn't going great. But ultimately we pounded our way through. And the original idea was to take cloud computing into healthcare. It was that simple. And the idea was, and this is pretty tactical, and it's going to start sounding a lot less, I don't know, inspiring and more tactical than anything else. We really wanted to do something. And the complexity of doing any kind of a new venture is you got to find your insertion point into what is a system. So if what you want to do is sell part of ERP, great. But you better figure out a way that you can get around Oracle, NetSuite, SAP, because if they have it covered, it's going to be very difficult. Same kind of thing if you're thinking, hey, I want to do something relating to healthcare data, and you walk right into Epic, you're going to have a tough time selling into the hospital.
Probably. So you're talking post NetSuite for you.
Post NetSuite. And
so this is DICOM Grid, aka before
this is, yeah.
Gotcha.
And so that's how I was really a software entrepreneur. And I had been, I was an enterprise software. Maybe I should stop. I can do the way back machine. The way back machine was that originally I was hopeful to I wanted to start a teleradiology business. And we thought we could do that. It would be really interesting. We teamed up with some people from a prestigious university. We went out and tried to pitch contracts. And we did not succeed. So that was my first, face plant and fail. I'd left that and sort of like, these file types are too big to move on the narrow bandwidth. So we moved into business software. We built up that company, sold that to Oracle NetSuite. I worked for them for a little while, enjoyed that greatly, but really wanted to get back out in the game and sort of circled back to radiology, which is why it's not quite as random as it seems. And one of the people who I had worked with on the teleradiology business said, remember how we said PACS companies do a terrible job of sharing images and being able to make things interoperable? Yep. That problem still exists. No one solved it. And if you're interested, this would be a great use of cloud technology. The bandwidth is better. We can figure all this stuff out. And off we went. And it was really an opportunity to work with a group of physicians who had been at the Barrow Neurological Institute, who had been kind of developing the technology and getting some initial traction, really using it themselves. And then we brought in some investment capital and really commercialized it from there. And it was quite difficult. The sales cycles inside of healthcare were then quite tough. And so maybe they still are. And that's kind of where it started. And we really, we loved it. I mean, there was a feeling that when you were doing it, one of the things that we didn't quite realize is the imaging is so important for any kind of advanced care. Yep. So almost always when we were moving imaging, we were moving not just the imaging, but we were driving a clinical outcome, which was really, really gratifying. And we did something, one of our first big success stories, which I talk about to this day with the people we did it with, was a little girl had fallen off of a tractor in rural Texas, had crushed her hip, and because we were able to move the imaging to a tertiary care center, they were able to prep and be ready. And then when she landed, they were able to take care of her at Memorial Hermann, and it transformed her outcome. Yeah. And, that kind of stuff, I was like, I can't really believe I'm doing this. Now, obviously, I'm not doing the care, and it's a very humble part of the whole thing, but you were kind of like, but I helped a little bit. Yeah. I did something. And it beats expense reporting. I mean, I was like, and that was really, really inspiring. And we had many examples of that. And one of the reasons we were able to get into one of our core accelerants, if you will, was to get into the Mayo Clinic. And the way that happened was very similar. We went to lunch with a great guy, Jeremy Fries, who was like the vice chair of investment or informatics, or the combination of the two. We finally got to have lunch with him. He kind of sat down and said, listen, I don't really usually eat lunch, pretty busy guy. And in fact, I'd rather just go back to the clinic and see if this thing works. We go back to the clinic, like, you know what? I've got a case right now, and they're going to FedEx me the CD, and I don't, that'll get here whenever it gets here. But if you guys can move this CD, that would be great. Let's do that test. We're sitting there, it's early days. It doesn't work seamlessly, but the guy's like a good guy, understands tech, and it works. And he's staring at it, and he's like, oh my God, I got to go. And I was there with one of our advisors, and I said, is this like, what happened? And he said, oh my God. He said, what this guy has, they were smart to move him to Mayo, because what this guy has, if they don't move very quickly, he's going to lose his leg. And so, these kinds of stories were, so then when you go to the investment committee, there's a guy who's sort of sitting there saying, we're just buying this. We're just doing it. We're doing it. And people are like, well, and at some level inside of healthcare, one of the things, if you get a clinical champion who understands this makes a difference between, losing your legs or not, being able to walk or not, all of a sudden, everybody else in the room, because they're all there for the right reasons, is kind of like, yeah, we got to do this. And that's pretty straightforward. And one of the things that we were very lucky with was just being out in the field enough to get enough use cases so that we were able to get that credibility to move forward. I loved it. And when I talk to people now, one of the things that I think is complex is you got to get to that insertion point. You got to find the gap where literally it wasn't as if we were saying to them, hey, Philips does this or whomever does this, but we do it better. Because that probably wasn't going to be the top of the heap. Or, no. Hey, Epic will bring this in for you, but ours just is cleaner and better. They were like, listen, our option is to have them mail it to us. I mean, that was literally that was the option.
Yep.
And that gap, one of the other problems we had in funding, quite frankly, is we would go pitch to investors and they would say, it's not possible that this gap exists. We just don't believe you that anything.
That's when you know you don't know healthcare.
Right
there. Thank you.
It was like nothing could be this stupid. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And they're like, this can't, sure, maybe for another few weeks you got a chance, but somebody's going to wake up, figure it out, and you're finished. And it's 10 years later, and I got to say, it's not a solved problem. We still have greenfield sales every year. We're still expanding our network. There are plenty of people who are uncomfortable and say, we won't look at it until we get the CD. There's all this static in the system that is very hard to believe.
Yeah, it's your experience is perfectly emblematic of so many other conversations I've had. Being back when I used to run, I was executive vice president class for 7 years. Then I ran a management consulting firm for 3 years. Then I've been running this growth acceleration platform for the last few years. And we work with lots of startups. We have a lot of startup clients, but we've also worked with a lot of the big Silicon Valley companies. And over the last 12 years, I can probably rattle off 50 conversations with these companies, and they'll say, we're going to come in, our tech's so great, we do this in the fintech industry, we're going to come into healthcare and bring this because it's all this friction and all this wild inefficiency and bureaucracy. And I sit there like, okay. And then they say, Jeremy, what do you think? And say, okay, what you see as a bug in other industries is literally a feature of healthcare. You don't fundamentally understand that the administrative bloat and the bureaucracy and the reticence, et cetera, and you see these terms, evidence-based medicine, evidence-based care, and you think, oh, well, if I can bring evidence and show them this is a better way, they're just going to do it. And I'm like, you're wildly naive. You're incredibly ignorant on it. It takes forever to get real change. You have to be in this. Your horizon had better be 5 to 7 years before you can really start seeing some fantastic uptake. Just understand, this is not like going in to manufacturing and logistics and supply chain and fintech, where if they see it and you can save them 0.5%, they are through the moon, put it in. And every one of them is, almost all of them end up being a ship, their ship got wrecked. Healthcare, the beach of healthcare is littered with the shipwrecks of companies and individuals and carpetbaggers that come in and go, oh, look at all this inefficiency. I'm like, nope, it's a feature. It ain't a bug.
Yeah, no, that's wise. And the way that manifested to us was when we first, there's so many things that are hard to understand, including in some ways the RSNA mentality trade show, where you put on this giant, it's really a huge investment for a small company. And is it really what we should be doing with our funds? Do we really have to be
and and these booths of GE and whoever, they're so big, they have their own gravity well almost, right?
Right. No, I mean, you can, if, it's designed that way. It's almost has features of like a Vegas casino where you can only go across it. You can't go around it. I mean, it's, it's impossible not
I just watched that Ocean's 11 last night again. He says casinos are designed as a labyrinth to keep you in.
They keep you in.
Yeah.
And so as a little company, you're like, do I really have to do this? And it's a lot of money and everything is expensive. we decided we did. And that's true, by the way, you have to do it. And at the end of the day, I met a guy, and he said, well, it's our second or third year. He said, well, this year I'm going to come to your booth. And I said, oh, great. And he said, I've known about you, but the first year I just watch. I'm not willing to come into your booth. I'm just going to hang on the outside and look at you.
Exactly.
The second year, I'll come into the booth and see if see what you got. The third year, I'll come back and I'll see if you're still in business, and I'll kind of do a little deeper dive. And then the fourth year, if everything's still going great, that's when I'm going to do a pilot for my institution. So when you say you have to have a 5 or a 7 year horizon, the buyers think that way. They are ready to move carefully. And one of the things that's sort of interesting, you mentioned class. One of the things that's very powerful in this industry is the phenomenon of, I'm not going to be the guy who sticks, his neck out. If a woman is driving a department, she's not saying, hey, my first priority is to be the outlier. What everybody does, we all get together and say, I need to do what is considered to be the state of the art. And that's true in care as well. So you don't hear your physician say, hey, I did something new and original. Typically, what they say is, let me tell you how this fits into the studies. Here's everybody else does it this way. And that's why we have confidence that it's going to work for you as well. And as a patient, you kind of like to hear that. Oh, you've done this 1,000 times. I feel a lot better when my surgeon says to me, she says, I've done this 1,000 times. And I say, I feel good about that. And this is the outcomes I'm designed to expect. But what's hard about innovation is, move fast and break things. And you do not want to hear that as a patient, and you don't want to hear that inside of healthcare. So how do you reconcile move fast and break things with do no harm? And how do you get those two things to line up? Because you've got to innovate. I mean, these people are scientists. Everybody you talk to is, I have to say, the one thing that I've loved about this industry is there's some exceptions, but people are here because they care. You know what I mean? It's not a place people go because they want to make a difference. And, fundamentally that matters. And
even all the support staff. I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. I said, even a CIO who's jaded and angry about everything, which we've run into them, they're in healthcare because there is more altruism than if they were the CIO at a bank. Sorry to any CIOs from banks that are listening, but it's just true. Down to cybersecurity people, doesn't matter who it is. There's a little bit of extra altruism by virtue of the organization they're working for.
100%. And what makes that enjoyable is you feel like you are kind of making a difference. And, I think I was once asked, how do you define your culture? And I said, we have to be and believe we are part of the care team. We're not going to touch a patient, but if we don't feel that emotion that somebody has when they're trying to help somebody and we get in the way of that, that is a disaster. And to understand the emotion that blows back to us, because I think some people who are on our support lines or involved in different pieces for the first time, they're amazed at the blazing frustration, verging on anger when somebody, and I'm like, listen, of course they are. You don't have any idea what pressure they're under. This is, they are, I don't want to be melodramatic, but it's life and death, right? I mean, it really can.
Yeah, they're either the people you're talking to, they're either directly involved in life or death or supporting the organization, an individual that's dealing with life and death. No one there's more than 2 levels removed. The whole Kevin Bacon thing. No, the lowest level person there, which there aren't low level in terms of importance, are only 2 levels removed from a patient.
And so when they feel it and they're conveying that, we've got to act the same way they're acting, which is you've got to be what are you going to say? What is it? I saw the Tom Cruise movie, and then he's talking to the pilots and he's saying, what are you going to say to the family if you don't do a good job? What are you going to say? What are you going to tell the family? Because that's what these people ultimately have to think about is, what are you going to tell the family if you weren't able to perform as you needed to and get the result that you wanted? And once you internalize that, by the way, it makes it a lot easier to understand the whole workflow, because all of a sudden you're kind of like, there is no casual workflow. And by the way, there's no kind of like, I'll get to it tomorrow. Like if my expense report comes out Thursday instead of Tuesday, or, 2 weeks from now, it's going to be annoying, but typically not a life-threatening event. And this is just very different. So for software people, it's a little bit of a different smoke.
Yeah, it's very, very well said. Very well said. And to your point earlier about organizations being really reticent, especially with newer companies, it's mainly it isn't the startups actually that I've seen that has caused this high degree of professional skepticism and reticence to work. It's been back in the day, the Revlons. It's IBM that's come in and out. It's Google that within a 12-year period did 4 hokey pokies. They were in, their left foot was in, their left foot was out, their left foot was in, they shook it all about, that kind of stuff. So I get it. Like if you're a physician or you're informatics, you're IT, or whoever it is, and you see some company that you don't really know, they're going through the process, and I've talked to quite a few of them. They say, hey, if some of the big companies out of Silicon Valley and the coasts couldn't make it, they were only in it for 2-3 years. It got too tough and they backed out for a while, had to kind of regroup, so to speak. Said, what chance does a small company have? So it's interesting, kind of the poisoning of the well that happened. And it's just, and I tell a lot of the companies we work with, just say, hey, it's gonna take a while. Like, know what your mission is and try to figure out really where you want to be. Do you want to work with children's hospitals? If it does, then okay, it's going to take a while, but stick to it. Don't all of a sudden run off and go, well, we'll just pick up this multi-specialty clinic, because then that's where you're going to tack. That's your ship is going to tack that direction.
Yeah, and that is, I think, very hard advice for small companies, because small companies will do anything to survive, because the first priority when you're a small company is don't die.
Make payroll. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What's your strategy? Don't die.
Yeah.
And I still have one of our sales team members who makes fun of me, and he says, in the early days, because we spend a lot of time talking about our value proposition, now we talk where we fit, and we do this and we do that. And every time we go through one of those discussions, he's like, do you remember what you said to me when I first joined and I asked you these questions? What did you say to me? I said, Scott, I know what you're going to say. But he said, yes, you told me sell anything. And that's kind of the startup mentality is you've got to figure something out. And
especially when you're bootstrapped, like it's not now, like you see some of these valuations.
Yeah.
And I just sit back and I go, someone pinged me. I'm like, dude, could you see Abridge just hit 300 million? That's the reason I put that post up. And I'm like, well, I
like that.
Just 5 or 6 years ago, someone's raising that kind of money. They're coming out with a new drug. It's not software, but so the world's just changed. Like these startups come out and say, yeah, we're real scrape, because we have a couple customers and they've done like 25 or $30 million A rounds. And like, yeah, we're still pretty scrappy. And I'm like, I don't think you know what that word means. Like you keep using that word. It doesn't mean, like Princess Bride. I'm not sure that word means what you think.
It's what you think it does.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think is tricky, and this is very well said by you, and you're pointing out these financial successes, and they are. I'm always, I think it's a credibility moment when somebody invests capital, for sure. But in a weird way, it also becomes a strange kind of boat anchor if you're not able to execute really well, because you are now on the clock. and you've got to return capital in a way that you got to step on that capital, because otherwise you're in big trouble. And I always get nervous about raising money, actually, because I have to kind of believe it's our almost last resort. Because if you aren't in last resort territory for fundraising, I think it's bad. Now, by the way, a lot of people have the opposite point of view, which is if you can get money, take it. And I hear that. But then you better know that you are sitting on top of this capital, that if you can't deploy it and make it much more valuable, and we're talking a lot more valuable. So when for a VC, a 2x, or I think probably 2.5x, think about this, 250% return is kind of break even for them.
Yeah.
And 6 or 7 is a good, successful, nice company. And then 10 and above is really great. And if you think about it, how many times have you invested in
which was Ambra?
Ambra was a 6.5 to 7.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, really good, but not, but humble. It's not a 10, it's not a 20. It wasn't one of those. I mean, but it wasn't a 0, which, by the way, is quite a common outcome. So we loved it.
Very common.
But to think about the idea, I look at this all the time. I think to myself, how many stocks have I invested in or seen or heard about, the hot tip, that have returned 6 or 7x? It's just not what happens. Now, by the way, that's the brilliance of the American innovation economy, is you have people who are out there on the risk curve, and they're doing all that stuff.
Yeah,
I get it. But what you're saying really makes sense, because now if I take another $10 million or $200 million in the cases you pointed out, I got to turn that into, multiply that by 6 or 7. I mean, we're now talking about, that's the order of magnitude that we're talking about. And you've got to be so dialed into those growth metrics and have so much confidence in them. And it puts a lot of pressure on entrepreneurs. And I think that it's fantastic. But I always sort of see it from the other side a little bit of what is, I can imagine these founders and these operators wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning thinking, how am I gonna make this not just better? Like, our standard was every day make the company a little better. That was our standard.
Yeah.
We never thought about valuation or growth. We just said every day it's got to be worth a little more. But you put a big bogey on yourself. And I think side of being an entrepreneur is underappreciated sometimes, when you see, it's not the same thing to just raise the round as it is to build the business. And that's kind of sometimes lost on people who aren't right in there, not on you, but on people who are like, oh, wow, they're done, they raised all this money. I'm like, no, they're starting. They're not done. They are starting.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It seems like with a lot of and I've done some calls about this and talked species, et cetera, then it's like, hey, we did an angel round or a seed round of, 3 to 4 million, which 10 years ago was massive. Like, you didn't see seed rounds at 3 to 4 mil. And so it's 3 to 4 mil. And then the A round is, 15 to 25 mil. But they already know, like, that's not enough because we're going to grow super. Our goal here is to get to the B and then get to the C and then get sold for 9 figures or something. Like, I don't see many companies getting acquired anymore that just do an A round and they stop. Like, I'm not seeing almost any of that anymore. It does happen, but it's normally, it's BC and they've raised so much money that now, it's almost like just the raise gets them more publicity, which I don't think is, maybe you're alluding this to. I don't think you want to be known for, hey, we raised 200 million or 100 million. You want to be raised for, hey, we've got 250 health systems and we're actually improving patient care by X and margins by X. Like, I think, and then, oh yeah, by the way, yeah, sure, okay, we raised $200 million. Like, we'd rather not to, but we'd rather just bootstrap it like Judy did and be one of the wealthiest people in the world, because I don't even think they ever took a loan from a bank for anything. So,
I think that, but what you point out is interesting. Right now, I'm curious to see there are some, I'm very lucky. I get to meet a lot of founders and innovators. It's I love what I do, and I'm meet a great community. And so I meet people now who are trying to bootstrap, or do it on 2 or 3 million, or do something very modest. And I'm very always excited to see that, and I'm curious to see the number of companies that start and then end up getting to a really good sustainable place is small. It's a high risk.
100%.
But right now we are in a phase of, even despite all the bumpiness in the economy and in the world, and it's in many ways a very disconcerting time, you still have an incredible amount of company formation, and kind of circling back to SIM, people who are really excited about trying to solve a problem where they believe there is no answer. And increasingly I'm finding people getting crisper on where their solution fits, not in the sense of, hey, this will just be better. This is like, literally, there's nothing. And when I hear there's literally nothing, that's when my ears kind of perk up, because I'm like, okay, is that nothing a big problem? Is that a gap? Like what? And you're starting to hear that and see that. And I'm pretty optimistic for what's going to happen. I'm pretty optimistic about, in some ways, our system is, when you get to a really kind of crisis point, and I think in many ways you could say American healthcare is in this kind of slow, you're like the frog, and it just keeps getting, it's not good, but it's starting to spur innovation and new thinking. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think you're going to, I guess maybe I'm being a little Pollyannish here, because if I probably am always a little bit of an optimist, but I feel like some of these things coming together are going to give people more possibility to resolve some of the things. And at the end of the day, for me, the thing that is most disconcerting about healthcare is access and quality without causing our whole country to just become a giant hospital. You know what I mean? Like, if we spend every dollar on that, that's not good. But at the end of the day, what I worry the most about is that it's the same thing that motivated image exchange. I just feel terrible when you can't get the right care. And there's nothing worse than, there are a lot of things worse, I guess, but it's up there with the idea that if you could have gotten the right care, and because they didn't have the right information, or you didn't have the right access, that feels really terrible. And that's a global problem. It's probably worse ex-US than it is in the US. But that, I think, is the promise right now of tech, is to try to bring more care to more people at a easier access point and at a rate that people can afford. And that's going to be, by the way, very, very bumpy, because what you said, feature bug, there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system and a lot of vested interest in the system that are not super excited, in a weird way, to change some of what's happening. And
there is a lot of money to be made in perpetuating mass inefficiency. There is a huge amount of money.
And that's going to be very, very bumpy, because those are, and by the way, if you put the sort of flip the perspective, these are reliable workflows. It's what you said, evidence-based medicine. These things have been proven to work, and we're not going to change them. And I get that. And that's the conflict right there. And it's not I think it's I think it's difficult to, if you don't think about it from both sides, it's kind of hard, because, then otherwise you're sort of left saying that's ridiculous, or the other person is saying you're an inappropriate, irresponsible risk taker. And, really the truth is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And I'm excited that I think we will start seeing more progress in that.
I agree. But the one good thing about the space that you're in is, I've been in healthcare since 2003, and started out really in radiology and medical imaging when I was at class. I started that practice part of class, and then grew up to run all the research teams. But the thing I saw was that radiology adopts technology faster than any other part of healthcare. It always has. It's just, and I don't think it's going to change because radiologists, I should say, they're unburdened with having to deal with the irrationality of patients. They don't actually have to deal directly with that patient. They serve the patient, certainly, but they serve other physicians, and they care about getting a case right, reading it right, but can they do more? Can they find more? They're obsessed with it. They've always been the business person. They're the perfect, well, I didn't say perfect, no such thing as perfect, but they're the closest to business and medicine being connected and being like, this business concerns don't trump the medicine concern, right? They do understand it. Like, I don't care about patients anymore. I don't care if I get it accurate. And it's one of the reasons I find they adopt, like the best, fastest adoption of AI was in radiology, because they had speech recognition before, they had CAD before, they had these things. And so when AI came along, that's why ADOC raised the most amount of money. You got Analytic and all these other ones, because they're like, can this make things better? Like, I don't know any I remember the Cultivating guys coming out. It was like a year ago. I really went after him on LinkedIn. He's like, in 5 years, AI there'll be no radiologists anymore. I'm like, whatever that, I want it, because whatever you're smoking, that is amazing. And I'm like, there's no way in the planet. Like, talk about, you don't know. Like, I get, like, you're putting money into Zebra that sold for 200 million or whatever. I can't remember who bought them. Like, I get it, you're saying it, but that was a really irresponsible, like, wildly ignorant thing to say. I went, come on, like, no radiologists in 5 years.
Well, what's interesting about radiology, I agree with everything that you said. There was an article by Atul Gawande a while back where he described that moment when you are in training and you are looking at an image and you are trying to decipher what it is. And he described the murkiness and the uncertainty and how you had to have some context, and how then at the end of the day, you had to kind of decide what you wanted to say. This is not like every case. I get lots of cases are more routine, but he was talking about a high stakes case. And I think what you're going to see is radiologists differentiating in a way that has them doing what they should be doing because they have unique capabilities, versus a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, anybody could do, and they just have to do it as part of their job. So it is not the best use of their talent. But at the end of the day, medicine, and this is, again, I could be wildly proven wrong, but I think that medicine is an art at some level. And you have these diagnosticians who, you walk in and they say, Morris, you're sick. And you're like, well, I was feeling a little funny. And they're like, you know what? Yeah, just know what's wrong. There's a sort of art of human experience. And
it's almost like, I wouldn't say extrasensory perception, but you can just pick up on
it's something,
whatever it is. Yeah.
And you can't, but what I love about the idea of AI is, I would love that physician to then have all the patient records summarized, to be able to stare at me, like you mentioned, to talk to me, not to type in the computer, do all those things. That would be amazing. And have the imaging right at their fingertips, have it all there so that their intuition is supercharged and allowed to reach its full potential. And that, to me, is what's going to happen in the next 5 years, or maybe 10, or God knows when. But I don't think you're going to all of a sudden be talking to Big Hero 6, and that's a cute kids movie. I love it. But you're not going to walk into a machine and they're going to say, here's the deal. You're going to walk into a machine, and then you're going to get a chance to talk to a person in a more human way. Because one of the things that happens right now is I feel like I'm talking to a machine sometimes when I'm talking to a physician, because they are so burdened by all the other stuff they have to do.
Yep.
And if we can change that equation, that's where I think you get the great unlock.
Agreed. AI, I mean, to me, I think we've talked about this before. AI has this irrational exuberance around it and irrational fear, mainly because they hear our AI and people get really, really nervous because most people, if you're not a programmer, you don't really know what it is. And so you immediately think, I was talking to someone yesterday, I said, AI to me is like those movies where in every movie, the alien's always hostile. Like it's not just hostile, like they're literal sociopathic thing that wants to eliminate everything. They're genocidal, whatever it is, like almost every time. And then AI is the same way. AI is just going to, I always ask, like, why would AI want to destroy humans? Like, do you help me understand that? Like, I get the movies. Like, why is that where your brain goes? Like right now, AI is really just a sophisticated form of autocomplete, right? And it's certainly making advances. It's just a natural evolution of software. Software's already heading in this direction. This is an acceleration. A lot of these things had already been happening. It's just now it's front and center with ChatGPT and OpenAI and the argument between Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and that's all fun theater, and it's great to watch. But it's like, everyone calm down. This isn't a panacea yet. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's coming closer. We're not there yet. You're not going to have these agents that are just going to interrupt the physician. Like the real best use case to me is I'm a physician, I'm a practicing clinician, and I'm just interacting with the patient. I'm doing whatever. And then when I'm done, then I turn to the digital assistant AI. I said, what did I miss? I don't want to get interrupted in the middle of anything. I don't want it all of a sudden prompts and alerts flying off in my face. Like, hey, I haven't done anything yet. All right. Now I'm in there. It's documented. Ambient's done it, or I've had my AI doc and my PACS or whatever it is. Like, okay, now like I would to any assistant who's watching.
Yeah.
What did I miss? Oh, okay. Hey, doctor. Yeah, I noticed this lesion or this lumens or this, whatever. That's what I'm looking for. I don't want something that's blasting at me. And I think from what I'm seeing, that's where it's trending. And so everybody needs to.
No, I love your tagline of what did I miss? And we see in some ways in even in radiology, one of the use cases that is very powerful is not replacing the radiologist's initial diagnosis, but is what did I miss? And that ability to do real-time QA peer review is very powerful because it's very inexpensive relative to having you and I both read the same case. And that's a what did I miss? And that is very different than, hey, would you do this? And then I'm going to check your work, which you could do it that way. But it turns out that humans are faster in a weird way because they if you ask them to check, it takes them a long time to do that.
100%. Whereas
machines are good at checking and not necessarily as good as having the contextual overall picture. I don't know. I mean, this is, it would be foolish for me to predict because things are moving so fast. But I remain, maybe irrationally so, convinced that medicine is fundamentally a human endeavor, that without the humanity in it is not going to work. And I don't quite know what form that takes, but that conviction, that thesis that humanity has to be front and center of this effort is what makes me both optimistic about AI and, as you say, maybe a little less of a kind of these machines are going to take over the world. I think they're going to help the world be better.
Yeah, and to your point, you can't replace the humanity in medicine because a machine can't feel your pain. And you being able to, and a doctor being over there, and I know that people, sometimes I've met with some doctors that I swear were pretty far on the autism scale, like they're not actually able to recognize that I'm a person and they can't really feel what I'm doing, but that's just their bedside behavior. They actually can feel. And that's what's so important. I don't want a decision. I used to say this about, I had this discussion with someone who was in the military, and this was about 10 years ago. And they said, we were talking about over lunch. I said, and he was against drone warfare. And I don't want to get political. And he asked me, he said, what do you think? And I said, well, here's my concern. I didn't serve in the military, but I, like all guys, I got to read about the Roman Empire and World War II and all this stuff. And I said, my concern is when you can make decisions where you're so far removed, like the old days, like until the First World War, Second World War, most battles didn't have enormous casualties because you couldn't risk it. And so when you're having to look at the other person and push a bayonet into somebody, that you really think twice whether I'm going to do something, because you are looking at the enemy and you will feel it. If you're just pressing a button and you're 1,000 miles away and you don't have any, and that's all you're doing now. That's my concern, is that if we go down this path of being so removed, what's to stop us from just doing war after war? Because even our soldiers aren't facing the consequences of that was an immoral order. I am not going to do that to that village. Well, okay, some guy playing video games in a bunker somewhere just hits the button, things blow up. And the same thing in medicine. And seems a little extreme, but you need that doctor there goes, well, I know what it's like to have a broken leg. I know what it's like to feel that just deep whatever. And so I can feel that, and that's going to actually, it's going to help me make the right diagnosis or make the right treatment plan. So
yeah, no, I agree with that, and so that drives. I mean, I feel lucky to be doing what I do, and it's hard to get to be in a position where you can do this, because it's a high trust business. It's a high, and so I really am very grateful to all the people who've kind of brought me along, because it's a learning profession, and people have spent a lot of time with me just kind of explaining stuff and being really, great mentors. And it's been a lot of fun. Working with you has been fun. I mean, it's just a kind of field where people like to share information, and it's competitive, of course, but it is also, it also, I think at the end of the day, I feel like we're competing about something that matters. And that's a good feeling.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. We're gonna put link to your profile on LinkedIn.
Okay.
In the show notes, we'll put Intelerad. Also, people can follow Intelerad.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks.
If there's anything else you want us to include in the show notes, just let us know. But this has been just a fantastic conversation. It was so informative and fun.
Yeah, it's been great. No, you are a fantastic interviewer, moderator, host, raconteur. You're top notch. And yeah, it's just, I think both of us, I'm going to speak for you a little bit, love this field. So it's kind of fun to, it's been fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, my friend. Have a great rest of your day. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeremy. It was great. Thank you so much.
See you, Morris. See you, sir.
Take good care.